Climate change is being talk of the world, and we see the impact on both tourist destinations and non-destinations alike. And in this webinar, we are going to explore just that. Hello, everyone. My name is Pavnesh Kumar, and I will be your host for this webinar. Before we start, there are some housekeeping notes, but we will get to that later. To start this webinar, now I would like to invite Chief Executive Officer of Pacific Asia Travel Association, Mr. Noor Ahmed Hamid, to give the welcome remarks. Noor?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining PATA's webinar today on the climate change impact on destination reputation. As the CEO of PATA, it is my privilege and indeed my honor, and I'd like to firstly take this opportunity to thank our good friends and partners at MMGY TCI Research, Olivier, for assisting us in organizing today's event. I would also like to thank our speakers from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Upali, and our friend at Tripadvisor, Fabrizio, for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join today's session. For those who may be unfamiliar with us, founded more than 7 decades ago, the Pacific Asia Travel Association, better known as PATA, is a not-for-profit membership association that acts as a catalyst for the responsible development of travel and tourism to, from, and within the Asia-Pacific region. By bringing together our private and public sector members, PATA facilitates meaningful partnerships to enhance the value, quality, and sustainable growth of travel and tourism in the region. I'm proud to say that the association PATA has been one of the pioneers in sustainable tourism even before the sustainability buzzword is commonly used. Our beginnings in sustainability began at the 1991 PATA Annual Conference in Bali, our 40th anniversary, where there was a call from over 1,500 delegates from more than 50 destinations to promote ecologically responsible travel and tourism under the conference theme, Enrich the Environment. This was in 1991. This occasion marked the beginning of PATA roles as the authoritative voice for sustainable tourism in the Asia-Pacific region. And in January 1992, the PATA Board of Directors approved the PATA Codes for Environmentally Responsible Tourism, which was officially adopted at the PATA Annual Conference in Hong Kong later that same year. Now, in the face of climate change, the travel and tourism industry faces an unprecedented challenge, highlighted by more severe and frequent weather patterns and record-breaking temperatures in 2023-2024. The effects of climate change on travel and tourism are expected to shift seasonal tourism trends and influence traveler destination choices with a focus on safety and environmental responsibility. Today's webinar, organized in line with the launch of our Q1 2024 edition of the PATA Issues and Trends Report, highlights the research done by MMGY TCI Research in analyzing the impact of climate change, discussions on destinations reputation in the Asia-Pacific region, especially in using social listening and sentiment analysis of travelers' review. The study found that climate change significantly divides the travel sector, with the potential to quickly improve or damage destinations' reputation, while travelers look for safer trips offering the full experience. Ladies and gentlemen, as we deal with the effects of climate change, sustainability emerged as an imperative ethos within the industry. As our planet grapples with escalating environmental challenges, the significance of adopting sustainable practices in travel cannot be overstated. Beyond being a mere industry buzzword, sustainability embodies a commitment to minimizing the adverse impact of tourism on our fragile ecosystem and local communities. The travel sector, which with its significant carbon footprint and resource consumption, plays a pivotal role in shaping global environmental outcomes. Embracing sustainability not only mitigates this impact, but also fosters resilience against the ever-intensifying effects of climate change. Moreover, it aligns with evolving consumer preferences as environmentally conscious travelers increasingly seek out eco-friendly and responsible travel options. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, the transition toward sustainable and responsible tourism is not merely a choice, but an obligation. I repeat, an obligation in safeguarding our planet's natural wonders for the future generations. It is a transformative journey that holds the promise of fostering harmony between human and human and nature, and ensuring that the wonders we explore today remain accessible and protected for generations to come. Once again, I would like to thank MMGY TCI Research for helping us organize today's webinar. Thank you to our speakers from the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority and Tripadvisor. Thank you, Olivier, Upali, and Fabrizio in advance. And thank you all participants for joining us here today. Thank you again from all of us at PATA.
Thanks, Noor, for the welcome remarks and the thought-provoking speech. Now let's continue with this webinar. Now we would like to invite our speakers, but before we do that, I know that everyone is well aware of the Zoom platform, but just to remind you, there is a chat feature that you can use to engage with other participants, and you can use the Q&A feature to submit questions that you would like to raise to the panelists. Please, I request, do not use the chat feature for question and answers, as it makes it quite difficult to go back and forth, and you may not get answer to your question. So please use the chat feature to engage with other participants and Q&A for raising questions. Now, let's start with the first presentation. And I would like to invite the Managing Director and Partner, MMGY TCI Research, Mr. Olivier Henry-Biabaud, to present. Olivier, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pavnesh. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you as well, Noor, for the very honest and very realistic, amazing introduction for setting the scene. I'm going to share my screen if you can allow me to do that, please, Pavnesh. For sake of clarity, the presentation I'm going to make for about 20 minutes is just a snapshot of the report that will be soon released, or the Issues and Trends report. So I'm going to go a bit on the surface of things, but I think the most important is that we keep time for the panel conversation with my colleagues right after that. Just, Pavnesh, if you can allow me to share my screen.
Olivier, you have the access, you can share the screen now.
Because I still can't. Yes, I can now. Perfect. Okay, so let me just play a bit around with the technique, and that should be all right. Yeah, hope everybody can see the screen now. I will make a brief introduction just to give a little bit of a sense of the data we're using and, a bit the methodology, because it's all about, data-based intelligence. Quickly, for those who don't know much about us, so we founded maybe 15 years ago and we've been awarded by UN Tourism Award. We are very proud to be a very long time PATA partner for providing intelligence and data-based research on various aspects of tourism. And really, what we've been doing in a decade is kind of establishing some standard for measuring three main areas that DMOs are looking for: the visitor sentiment, the destination reputation, and the resident sentiment. And when we talk about reputation, and this is typically something that we've been using for this particular webinar and report, we look at the destination reputation at large. So not only what guests and visitors are sharing, which is of course essential to shape a good reputation of your destination, but also what we call the external factors, which we know from all the data trends we see are playing an increasing role. So we talk about geopolitics, we obviously talk about climate change. It could be about societal issues or public responses, all these factors on the news that you can see every day when you look at the TV news or your favorite newspaper. So those factors have a huge influence on the place as potential place to visit. You have very, very little control of them, but they do have an impact. Then we look at the social conversations through blogs and forums and social networks. So all the tourism and adjacent sectors related to mobility or lifestyle or business or education that are also influencing the way potential travelers are looking for places to visit. It could be very organic, and it could be also things where you as a DMO can have an influence to shape the reputation and sometimes mitigate the impact of external factors on your destination reputation. And finally, obviously, the visitor experience is key. People are looking for, peers' comments, typically from platforms like Tripadvisor and others. So it's important to get that reputation data sphere at large to be able to pilot and understand the impact of any specific events, typically such as climate change on the reputation. So I'm going to start with looking at, first of all, how climate change is kind of growing the conversation on travel. And what does it mean? What are the conversation tracks? What do people talk about when mentioning climate change in relation to travel and tourism? First of all, needless to say that, and that's a very good reason why we're today together sharing on that, it's particularly in Asia Pacific. It's also the case in other places in the world. And we've done something very similar in Europe recently for a European Travel Commission. We see a very growing level of conversations, posts and articles from obviously the medias, but also citizens and travelers, companies, organizations. Everybody talks more and more about this travel impacted by climate change. It's something, if you look at last year, which has been really growing constantly, we estimate that the pace of the number of mentions and articles about travel, climate change impacting travel has been kind of doubling, multiplied by 2 between the first part of the year and the end of the year, and it's growing and growing. Compared to some of the regions like Europe, something specific in Asia Pacific is this conversation about climate change in travel is really constantly growing, whereas maybe in Europe you have a lot of concerns and conversations about that, mostly during maybe summer when you have all these unfortunately natural disasters and wildfires in Greece or Portugal. So it's more like seasonal, whereas in Asia Pacific it's really something that is kind of growing for all the reasons I'm going to explain. Some, of course, all behind the numbers of the thousands of conversations mentioning climate change in travel, there are like hundreds of different topics, subtopics, and themes. Just to mention a few of them, which are the most, let's say, recurrent in relation to Asia Pacific destinations. It's a lot about either coastal erosion issues, many aspects, because Asia Pacific is really home of so many natural diversity. So there are mentions about, species which tend to get, a bit of extensions or threat to wildlife. Of course, the extreme weather conditions provoking some natural disasters like floods or wildfires. And all these pictures are kind of, turning on, CNN and all the big news usually. So creating a bit of anxiety, so to speak. Of course, the heat waves, on the one hand, too much water, on the one hand, not enough water on the other hand, more frequent severe storms. So you name it, right? It's a lot of course, anxiety mostly. Also things around ski resorts in New Zealand or Australia facing issues because insufficient snowfall, and some of the things which already kind of was already existing before we started talking about climate change, like maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. There were some recurrent conversations about air pollution in some places in Asia Pacific, and this is kind of exacerbated through climate change. And many other things, such as typically because of climate change, there are new kind of dangerous species invasion or moving from one place to another places that possibly as a tourist you can also face. So as you can see, that this list is obviously not limited. It's pretty, unfortunately, very diverse, pretty negative. But if we look at the polarity of all these growing conversations, it's not always negative. And this is one of the key points I would like to insist on, because obviously every aspects of climate change tend to be negative usually. But if you compare the polarity of conversation, and this score is showing the balance between positive and negative mentions about first Asia-Pacific travel overall in a dark blue line, which tend to be still very positive in general. So it can be up and down, but basically Asia-Pacific still benefit from a very strong, robust, positive reputation overall. But when you deep dive into the same conversations mentioning something about climate change, then you have, of course, many more elements of volatility. It changes a lot. It could be like super minus, like minus 23. And behind that volatility, obviously, you have that, permanent balance between a lot of obviously anxious and negative factors, and especially when you have a big natural disasters coming, in one particular place, this is impacting the entire region reputation, but then very quickly you can also recover. So what I mean by that is, of course, the average score for Asia-Pacific destinations overall compared to when things around climate change is mentioned is way more negative. It's like 20 points below on average if I look at the entire year. But still, it also means that it is positive to keep some elements of optimism or positivity for reputation, depending on. And if we start listing all the factors and reputation tracks, conversations which still mentions Asia-Pacific destinations in relation to climate change, there are a number of positive elements. Many of them could be either through the consciousness about the exactly as Noor was introducing, it's an obligation, so we need to collaborate. So there are many efforts throughout the entire region, cooperation between destinations who may compete within each other. They may not be like the best friends on earth, but they still are looking at climate change as a joint challenge to face. And so many collaborative international efforts is providing positivity. Also, we are looking at many or hearing in social conversation and social listening, many conversations about some of the, let's say, typically large carbon emitting countries, could mention India or China, which are now taking a lot of very positive actions to kind of mitigate and combat the climate change impact overall, with positive aspects for travel and tourism, and also a number of new innovation techniques which are kind of tested in the region, like how to use land reclamation, how to use natural-based techniques in Vietnam, for example, to kind of combat and adapt to the climate change. And also a lot of, Asia-Pacific is home of so many festivals, big events, and we are seeing more and more of these events trying to be more and more sustainable and to other way to combat climate change as well. Also, we are hearing a lot of conversations about kind of new travel seasons and destinations, or maybe you have a chance to be able to visit a place in a different times because somehow seasons are a bit changing. And of course, it's a bit ironic sometimes, but you can hear maybe very selfish people saying, "Oh, we need to go to the Maldives right now because basically Maldives is a paradise that's going to maybe not exist in, I don't know, maybe 50 years from now. So we need to go there." So sometimes it's a little bit like, ironic, but a lot of positivity. So about transportation, cruise liners, the airline industries who are going to adapt with maybe cleaner energy sources, how ports are going to decarbonize themselves. A lot of major cities also having master planning to better develop the city in a sustainable way to combat also climate change. Using again natural solutions. The hotel sectors definitely in Asia Pacific making a lot of efforts to offer either, more eco-friendly options or vegan options, typically, and really countless number of preservation-oriented or regenerative initiatives that Asia Pacific, which may be a very vulnerable region in the world with climate change, is actually now starting really to go to the next level in terms of innovation and kind of promoting ecotourism project with a very specific purpose to combat or mitigate at least or alleviate the effects of climate change. Usually not only for the visitors, but of course, and probably first of all for the communities and local residents. So when you look at all these polarity of conversations, which obviously tends to be usually more negative than positive for sure, but still you have, when you deep dive into specific destinations, a lot of, let's say, volatility. So this is kind of a ranking which can really change like every month. So it's not something that is, kind of, established for forever. It's something that can change a lot. And what you see there are the scores of specific destinations in relation to travel when things around climate change are mentioned in social conversations. Probably many of you would be maybe surprised to see some destinations still able to be extremely positive with this topic, whereas some are kind of very maybe challenged by the topics. So beyond that, what's important is to understand the drivers of a conversation. What is driving the reputation, for example, for Nepal? Why is Nepal currently facing maybe a bit of negativity in terms of reputation because of that? In the case of Nepal, and this is again very much detailed in a report, but one of the reasons why Nepal is currently facing challenges in terms of reputation is because Nepal is so much popular for the climbing and the hiking experiences. It's kind of an iconic place for that. And because climate change is kind of changing the experience and maybe the reputation of that, it's suffering a lot because this is touching one of the very iconic experience that the destination is able to offer, and it's associated to a bit of negativity, typically because there were like quite a conversation about many people dying on the Everest, and because of not only over tourism kind of things, but also because of climate change. So when you combine different sustainability centric subjects like a bit of over tourism plus climate change, you see the reputation kind of going really down. Australia is another great example. Australia has a reputation which is still very positive in general, but they are kind of portrayed or depicted as a place where the climate change is so visible because it's so much nature oriented, and we see so many potential threats on that as well it's touching kind of the icon or the brand for brand equity and value of the place. So we see a bit of a down in reputation for a place like that. Of course, the Maldives typically is so much becoming a sort of a place that is home of so many conversations about climate change because it's super tangible, and the Maldives can be very vulnerable to that, but also they are doing a lot of actions to kind of compensate. So it's creating a lot of conversations which are kind of mixed feeling because it's still obviously a paradise, but it's a paradise that is at risk. And so because of that, we see as well some reputation impact, but also some positive elements because people going there also are aware of that, and they know maybe they can be part of the solution and not only of the problem. And then just to give one example about why Vietnam is kind of during the whole year last year still benefiting from a relatively a positive score. It's not because they don't have problems. They do have a lot of challenges. They do have massive challenges in terms of vulnerability to climate change. But the thing is, the reason why the polarity still is positive is because there are, and there are many examples in the report you will be able to read, but it's really a combination of testing many different things, taking, the facing the challenge, not hiding it, and through a lot of cooperation, international cooperation, using nature to combat that. So all those reactions to climate change even if they are facing a lot of challenges in the reputation sphere, is adding a lot of positivity because they are doing things concretely to combat. And Sri Lanka is exactly the same. And obviously, I will not comment on that because our friend Upali is certainly will be able to share a lot of examples and interesting ways on how to combat the challenges that still are there in their own destination. The second aspect we consider is looking at, how far this climate change is kind of changing travelers' perception. We are actually, and this is something that is pretty much transverse to any markets and any destinations in the world, but there are three main, let's say, sentiment currently that are kind of living in travelers' mind, either potential travelers or visitors. One of the sentiment is basically about a kind of pent up, sometimes very clearly expressed sentiment of guilty, because of course we're talking today about the impact of climate change on travel, but for many people in the world, and especially the younger generation, it's also the problem of travel impact on climate change, because it's obviously working both ways. So because of that sentiment of a bit guilty, people still want to travel, are still traveling, and they have to basically as well, but they do feel that they're trying to pay attention, to behave more responsibly. Maybe they say, okay, I'm based in London, I would like to go to my next Thailand, travel, but I'm feeling a bit guilty because doing this, of course, I'm taking flight, so I'm emitting carbon. And so all these are creating a very weird sentiment of, still willingness to travel, but a bit of guilt. And so in terms of how DMO should consider that, it's probably by, better informing and guiding, trip planners to see how they can kind of offset or compensate that. Of course, guiding them to eco-friendly activities or transportation mobility options that limit the impact of travel at destination. I think one of the key things is to be extremely transparent and not trying to hide the vulnerabilities they may have and the problem that they may have, and educate visitors so they are part of the solution, or at least they limit the impact on that. And obviously making everything possible to maximize the social and economic benefits, because in consumer mind, there's a clear link in between traveling to a place, kind of impacting the place in terms of social impact, economic impact, and giving probably more also resources, so the place is able to have more basically money to invest in order to be even more sustainable and to combat potential issues that they will have to combat more and more in the future in terms of basically safety and issues like that. So this guilty sentiment is pretty much a pent-up sentiment, but it's certainly growing because again, it works in both directions. Climate change impact travel, but for sure in many consumer mind, travel also impact climate change. So we have to live together with that. Then the key aspects in terms of how climate change is also impacting the travel planning process, and how people consider that as a parameter among many other parameters, which could be also very external factors like geopolitics and social unrest and issues like that. So the main concern is about the weather predictability. So today, most travelers obviously are very aware of the climate change. They are aware of the potential risk, but they are still ready, of course, to travel. And so the key aspects is, what's the best season to visit? I'm not sure if I take my flight to visit that particular place in 15 days. I'm not sure about predictability of the weather. So it creates a lot of conversations about, you cannot really predict anymore. So there's no normal. So there used to be very clear seasons in terms of, I don't know, moussons and dry season, but now you're not pretty sure about that. So most conversation will be about, what is the best horizon and the best seasons or times in the month, in the year to visit. And usually the answer to that, either by authorities or by local people or other visitors, would be, look, you cannot be sure anymore. So it's all about, what type of risk am I going to take as a trip planner in terms of finding a good or not so good, convenient weather, or maybe potentially taking some risks because of hurricanes or issues like that. So that level of anticipation is really populating a lot of conversation. And I'm just taking one example from our fans of Tripadvisor, of people saying, okay, now with climate change, nothing is guaranteed. So you have to take your risk. And this is, things that doesn't stop people to choose a place, but it's more about what is the best moment for that. And it sometimes open new windows for shoulder season, or people would be willing maybe to say, in any case, I'm not sure, but it's okay. It's not about just the weather. I want to discover the culture, the nature, the food, so whatever. So it's like, okay, maybe it's less safe in terms of guaranteed in terms of climate and weather, but I'm still taking the risk. But if I can mitigate the risk, I would do that. The other, of course, the other aspects, and as you remember, the negativity in the sentiment is obviously due to the tragedies and all the problems that are more than problems, because it really puts sometimes, of course, first the residents and communities, but also potentially the visitors at risk. It's something we've been seeing in a past decade, actually. Travel or trip planners are more and more risk managers. So they include now the weather predictability and climate change as another element of risk management. And so they are basically looking at, the risk to get either storms or landslides or fires in the woods or avalanches because of climate change impact, and how far, the extreme weather condition is going to maybe increase air pollution and, impacting their health, and things like going maybe to plan a trip to Australia, but I've heard about these new mosquitoes because of climate change that are, kind of carrying new diseases and stuff like that. So a lot of not only weather predictability now, but more about the safety aspect. And safety is definitely something that is the number one today criteria for choosing a destination. The overall safety perception is actually the number one for most of the long-haul markets, as we've recently measured that for the European Travel Commission. Safety, quality, and the climate and weather conditions. So that level of concerns is also something that doesn't stop people to travel, but still where they are looking for safe places to visit. Obviously, they may tend to choose destinations offering the the best or the least risk around that. And finally, a bit in the middle, and I'm aware that it feels a bit weird because as we speak, there are actually millions of people who could be displaced or really put at risk and kind of surviving because of climate change. So it's a bit weird to talk about the little comfort of travelers thinking about I just want to go there for my golf course trip in the year, but I'm not sure about golf quality because maybe there's not enough water or water shortage in that place. It feels a bit like weird, but still it's the case. There are many conversations about I'm not sure if I go at that time, if I will be able to see the beautiful nature, because nature has been a bit, changed because of climate change. Or what about, would I face some constraints in terms of transportation or travel frictions, travel disruptions? What about my flight turbulences? Things like that, about more the limited experiences at destination. So in terms of how to deal with that, it's important to keep an eye on informing about what's going to be maybe limited as opposed to fully open, and how to better plan all this. And finally, and this is the last slide actually I would like to share with you to try to finish on a pretty positive note, because we are all aware that everything is a bit more like driving anxiety and a bit, it's a bit scary to be honest at some point. But still, the good thing is when we look at visitor reviews in platforms such as Tripadvisor, and we're collecting actually 40 different platforms to measure a bit the sentiment of consumers and guests. when they travel, we do see a real surge of comments and reviews mentioning something around sustainability, not necessarily climate change, but a lot of things around sustainability, such as the hotels we have been saying is doing great efforts about environment. They have great policies for energy use, and maybe they're putting possibilities to use electric bikes as opposed to maybe just rental a car. Both are fine, but all these things. So we're seeing in Asia Pacific, we have the same trend in Europe. Maybe not a surge, but a very growing, year after year, a growing number of mentions about sustainability, showing that it is something now very part of the DNA. It doesn't mean people are changing their behaviors, but they are definitely changing more their opinions about that, getting more responsible. And so whereas it still represents only 1 out of 100 of comments on platforms such as Tripadvisor, it's still growing a lot. So it means that there is room now for educating, and something really important I would like to mention as a conclusion is the destinations who tends to be the most proactive in terms of being more sustainable, being more honest about the way they are looking at climate change impacts, not trying to hide things, but taking actions to that. Those destinations tend to be the more positive in terms of reputation, because consumers are becoming very, very now mature about the concept. So it's working on this is not only a question of surviving; it's also a question of protecting the reputation and appeal. And it's not like because you are constantly in the news with bad reports about climate change issues, that you cannot have still a great level of attractiveness by simply taking the challenge instead of just trying to hide it or just doing like greenwashing communication. That's for me. So happy to take the questions with my colleagues. So Pavnesh, I leave you the floor back.
Thanks, Olivier, for the wonderful presentation. I found it quite insightful. And I believe our fellow panelists and also the participants are going to have a lot of questions. So before that, let's dive into the panel discussion. So for the panel discussion, we just heard from Olivier his presentation on tourist sentiment. Now I would like to invite to the panel Deputy Director General and Head of Sustainable Tourism Unit, Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, Mr. Upali Ratnayake. Please welcome Mr. Upali. And last but not least, our third panelist for the panel discussion, Global Director, Industry Affairs, Tripadvisor. Please welcome Mr. Fabrizio Orlando. Okay. Fabrizio, are you there?
I am.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Everyone.
Great. So we will start in the same order. Olivier, the first question goes to you. So you have just presented a wonderful presentation and you have mentioned a lot about the role of climate change. Our question is how MMGY TCI Research integrates social listening and sentiment analysis to identify shift in traveler perception. And then how is this data informing the strategies for destination to adapt and communicate their sustainability efforts?
Sure, it's true to say that given the challenge, which is such a huge challenge, you need data to navigate, and obviously before talking about any sort of social sentiment data and marketing and destination management, the first thing to consider in terms of data set are obviously the science and how your destination is going to look like by 50 years from now, in terms of basically how people are going to live in the place, but also what is how the face of the destination is going to change, basically in terms of climate, in terms of coastal erosions, and in terms of basically future experiences for travelers. But in terms of social reputation, people are looking for places they trust to visit. So it's and really beyond the question of cost to travel, it's about trust. And so trust is something that we use a lot through social listening techniques, as mentioned at large. So from blogs and forums and news and guests and visitors sharing their comments and opinions. And so in terms of what we typically do, and destinations typically do using the data in terms of reputation is not only looking at, you know, the intensity and the volume of conversation, but really trying to understand what is driving positivity, what is driving negativity. In a sense of climate change, as you saw, it's usually more negative than positive, but still the most important is to look at what are the market sensitiveness. I didn't mention that, but typically China, Australia are kind of markets traveling within the region, but also to other regions like Europe or North America. They are one of the most sensitive markets because we see many more conversations about that. They really are kind of either concerned or they just want to better plan having this conversation on all this information about that. So the data can help understand also what are the most sensitive markets in terms of sustainability. The benchmarks, typically, let's say if you have in, I would say maybe Sri Lanka, maybe 10% of conversation about Sri Lanka in context of travel, mentioning elements about climate change. You need to know if it's, you know, a problem or not, so you can benchmark that as well. So we do a lot of that. And beyond the metric, the most important again is to understand what are the drivers and particularly the resilience factors. And so when we look at the impact of climate change, there are two ways to understand the reputation impact. The first one is beyond the negativity factors, which are always there, what are the positive factors related to that? And I mentioned a few of them, and there are plenty of them in the reports, by the way. But also the interest is to look at what are the other reputation factors which are kind of compensate the impact and negative impact of climate change. Typically, I'm taking one example here in Europe. Greece has been so much on the news in terms of wildfire that during the period we saw for them such a big drop of reputation. But then they very quickly recovered because they have a lot of permanent positive resilience factors around gastronomy or culture. So the data we use is helping destinations actually to understand what are the reputation drivers they can still activate to compensate the image without never hiding the reality, but compensating that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Olivier, for this wonderful explanation. A quick note to all our participants, you are free to post any questions that you would like to pose to our panelists. And if you want to have a question directly to a specific panelist, you can also write their names. That makes it much easier. Or if you have a generic question, you can just post it in Q&A as it is. All right. Now, moving on to our next panelist, Mr. Upali. The question for you is, from your extensive experience in promoting sustainable tourism in Sri Lanka, could you discuss the challenges and success in establishing 9 sustainable tourism destinations across the country, especially in the context of climate change?
Hi, thank you very much for organizing very important seminar to PATA, and also appreciate the detailed presentation and answering to this question. Actually, the sustainable tourism has become a very important segment, as well as the very important management method we apply in destinations. When look at in Sri Lanka picture, learning from the world, we felt that we are a little behind, but still, so we have started sustainable tourism initiative before the COVID. Then what we look at is initially to offer certification to the industry, and when the COVID challenge came in, taking this challenge as a taking this challenge into our strength, we have communicated with the 9 provinces in the country and suggest that they can identify a future destination to be certified as a sustainable destination. Happy to share with you the 9 destinations was proposed by 9 provinces. Being a smaller country, we have only 9 provinces in the country, and we have selected, and from the 9, one has gone forward, called iconic attraction called Sigiriya. The area also called Sigiriya has done the carrying capacity study as well as the value chain study. Then the government has taken up as a priority this destination being a World Heritage Site to develop as a sustainable destination, similar to the central province. Other provinces also on their way with their 9 destination. Of course, what our aim is, addressing the climate change is the very subject that we are discussing, which is a challenge not only for tourism but all the industries, but particularly a sensitive industry like tourism, taking this not as a challenge but as an opportunity where the sustainability going to answer most of the climate change results as a resilient. That's how we take it up. And of course, climate change comes naturally. And also there is a contribution with the human impact. And where the human impact in tourism is quite extensive. So where these 9 destinations will going to help us as an adaptation measures as well as the mitigatory measures for the climate change. And of course, now we are in the starting stage and moving with 9 destinations where we also can share our lessons. So we face a lot of challenges when come to a destination. It has not only the attraction but also tourism services and even the informal sector with the SME as well as the organization who just emerged. But still, see, with every one of them, the stakeholders are quite positive, and we are working to get the 9 destination into limelight when time to come. This is how we are moving with the Sustainable Destination Initiative in Sri Lanka, which will address to the challenge of climate change as well.
Thanks, Upali, for that wonderful insight on how Sri Lanka is tackling the woes of climate change and surely starting to change the perception of the travelers as well. Fabrizio, welcome. I know you have been taking notes and listening to the entire conversation with a lot of potential answers. So now is the time for your question. So given your overseeing Tripadvisor's global thought leadership projects and partnership, how does Tripadvisor leverage its platform to influence traveler perceptions on sustainability and destination reputations, particularly in the context of climate change?
Thanks, Pavnesh, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you, Pavnesh, thank you, Noor, and the entire Pata team for organizing this webinar and this discussion, and of course, Olivier and Upali for sharing your point of view and perspective. As you said, I work for Tripadvisor, so if we were in a real room, I would ask how many people, how many participants know the company, and I guess I would see a lot of hands raised. There you go, so you know it. And of course, Olivier, you mentioned us during your presentation, so you should be aware of us. But I think that the natural connection that everyone makes with Tripadvisor is just reviews, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity missed there. Tripadvisor is about discoverability, so we allow small businesses and small destinations, or even big businesses and big destinations around the world, to promote themselves on our company, because we believe that the more information people can find, travelers can find about their destinations, their trips, the more informed they can be when they make decisions. So for us, it's extremely important to obtain all this content and allow people to have access to it and inform themselves. And gladly, sustainability, and Olivier, you were mentioning it in your presentation, is becoming more and more important, and people are researching more sustainable destinations, sustainable accommodations, certifications. So it's becoming part of the travel adventures that we all want to live. Noor was saying at the beginning of his presentation, sustainable tourism is now an obligation. I would have said there is a priority, but I completely agree, it's an obligation. And I think that this obligation brings change, transparency, and accountability, which are extremely important. And you know, there's a lot of research in sustainability, and we ourselves conducted some research also with MMGY. And I was reading yesterday a publication from Skift and Visa. They were saying that 66% of travelers that responded to their survey said that they're aware of the need of traveling more sustainably. And 46% of them said we are actively seeking for sustainable alternatives. And this, I think, is very important because it ties back to my first point about discoverability. We as Tripadvisor, but in general as travel companies, need to be there to allow travelers to have access to those sustainability information that they're looking for. And at Tripadvisor, we've always been pioneers, I would say, in the sustainability space. In 2013, we created Green Leaders, which was the first sustainable travel program ever created. And we were trying to highlight and put a bit more emphasis and positive light on accommodations that were obtaining sustainability certifications, or they were actively doing initiatives and activities in the sustainability space, so that, again, people, travelers, our users could have easier access to this type of information. In 2019, we co-founded with Prince Harry and his coalition and many other travel companies, the Travelist Coalition. So again, the goal was, let's create a sustainability standard that can be easily understood and especially easily found by travelers that are interested in traveling more sustainably. So we always try to work on the supply and demand. As every industry, our industry works is based on supply and demand. So we were trying to provide travelers with all the information that they needed, and at the same time work with accommodations and destinations to give them the opportunity to promote themselves on our platform, and especially to promote all these sustainability focused campaigns and activities and initiatives that they were running. When you look at climate change in general, I think Olivier, you said that as well. It's not easy to really understand what climate change is. There's a lot of different declination of the expression. No? I think about I joined Tripadvisor in 2019, and I've always been focused also on sustainability. And the key focus of my work was on over-tourism. Then COVID came, and there was no tourists at all. So over-tourism became from one of the major issues that we had to no issue at all, unfortunately. Today, we're looking to, especially destinations, are looking to minimize greenhouse gas emissions. So it shifted a little bit. During COVID, we worked a lot on crisis preparedness, on resilience, and especially on natural disaster. Think about Hurricanes Ian, Hurricanes Fiona, the wildfires in Greece, Portugal, etc., etc. So a lot of things changed in those years. But I think that what is really core of what we do and what we will keep doing in the future is it is our responsibility as an industry to understand what's going on from a climate change perspective. It's our responsibility to understand how our industry is influencing those changes. And I think from a Tripadvisor perspective, it's also our responsibility to make sure that once we understand everything that is going on, we can have our users and travelers anywhere around the world have an easy access to information about sustainable alternatives, sustainable travels, just to make sure that we help them help themselves in becoming more sustainable and traveling, especially more sustainably.
Perfect, Fabrizio. So now in the essence of time, we have a lot of questions, so we will slightly change the pace of questions. Now we are going to the short answer type. So I will request each and every one of you to keep it in 30 to 45 seconds so we can have more questions out of you. So participants will also feel nice about the information sharing. So Olivier, the question to you is, what are the most common misconceptions about the impact of climate change on destination reputations that your research has debunked?
Sure. Quickly, I mean, there's an obvious kind of misconception, which kind of, could be common sense. So it's not like, it's not surprising to hear that, but there's a common idea that destinations who are constantly experiencing a lot of, natural disasters due to climate change are the one that are not maybe anymore on any trip planner's bucket list. And it's really not the case. It's not because you're not so much on the spotlight in the news that you have the best reputation, and on the contrary. And we've seen the example of Vietnam, which is very vulnerable, but is still keeping a good reputation because of the behaviors and the tangible actions they are taking. So in the ranking you've looked, maybe in the presentation and the report, this is changing like really every month. This is very volatile. So what really impacts the reputation is not only the reality of the possibly negative disasters due to that, but it's more how the brand, how the organization, how the country itself is taking actions to combat in a very honest way, with honest communication, with concrete action, because climate change is very tangible, so the solutions should be very tangible. And this is what is changing the reputation more than just the reality of the problem. And one aspect I just would like to mention very quickly is what is good for visitors is also good for the local community. So the climate change is not only for visitors, of course. It's something that in priority should be done for the local communities. And that is also part of the changing the reputation of the place with a lot of positive elements. So what is good for residents is good for visitors as well in terms of reputation and concrete actions.
Perfect. Thanks, Olivier. Upali, the question to you is, what innovative method or project in sustainable tourism are you most proud of implementing in Sri Lanka? You're on mute, Upali.
Sorry. Yeah, interesting question. Actually, taking the lessons from the other part of the world, we decided to introduce a National Sustainable Tourism Certification Scheme for Sri Lanka as a part of our strategy initiative. And taking the step forward, we have had the pilot project, and learning our own experience, we thought of like many may not be able to understand at the beginning what the sustainable certification, and also they may find little difficult to enter in when you look at the criteria, which is the global criteria, where everywhere the global sustainable tourism council criteria people are using or other organizations are using. So as an innovative initiative, we have initiated self-assessment system, which is a scaled down criteria in line with the global criteria, but of course as a start point, so they themselves can come into a web portal and enter your data, and also it give a percentage of your success, so which will give you a message that what extent you are successful and what steps need to be taken to go ahead. So likewise, some sort of a new idea we have put it.
Thanks, Upali. That's wonderful. Great to see initiatives that are taking shape and changing the lives. Now, back to you, Fabrizio. The question for you is, you just mentioned, TripAdvisor, people know for just reviews, and there's so much more that TripAdvisor does. So how does TripAdvisor plan to further integrate sustainability into its platform in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll be very quick. I mentioned green leaders earlier in my previous answers. I mentioned Travalis and the fact that we co-founded the coalition. So we will definitely be still working on Travalis, and we're working on a way to make sure that accommodations anywhere around the world that have sustainable accreditations and certifications can not only display them on our platform, but can also be easily accessible and found by our users, which again is key to help them travel more sustainably. Another thing that we're doing that we actually did in 2024, so January 2024 was the first time we did that. We have our Cleverest Choice Awards, which is a very long program in which we award destinations, accommodations, restaurants, beaches, etc., etc. And in January, we started for the first time a sustainability list. So we had our Cleverest Choice Awards for destinations that included a list of sustainable destinations. So those are the most tangible, if you want, activities that we're working on in this moment. But in general, I think our objectives will always be to help travelers around the world have easily access to sustainable information so that they can make informed decision. And if they want to travel more sustainably, they can find those information to do that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Fabrizio. So, Olivier, now this is going to be even shorter answer type question. Do you believe that destinations with a strong sustainability message are becoming the new luxury in traveler choices?
I would say I'm afraid to say probably yes. To be honest with you, I think that by maybe 10, 15 years from now, long haul travel is probably going to be again a kind of a luxury good anyways. And so adding the environmental constraint will certainly put extra cost on flights, extra cost on eco-friendly hotels. So probably the long haul travel will be sooner or later kind of an affluent kind of segment again. Those who would be able can afford to pay. It's very sad because sustainability should not be a matter of money, but realistically, it's a very plausible scenario that sustainability is going to be kind of the new luxury.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Olivier. Upali, the question to you is, can mangrove ecotourism be a model for other countries in the Asia-Pacific region? Why or why not?
Most certainly, yes. The mangrove population or mangrove is a very sensitive plant, which is again conservation is required. And the suggestion with the mangrove conservation to take into tourism and as an alternative, generate an alternative income through the mangrove ecotourism activity is the model suggested or researched, and that can be replicated any country where the mangrove plants, mangrove the environment, instead of keeping it isolation as well as threatening by poor people sometimes. So that can be utilized any country as a model for conservation of the environment, particularly the mangrove, the plants, and also the benefit to the local community. So that give you a multiple benefit than a single benefit by cutting the mangrove tree, using for firewood, and it will be a model for any country can be used for conservation as well as tourism development with ecotourism initiative.
Perfect. Thanks, Upali. Now, Fabrizio, over to you. The question for you is, what is one simple yet effective way a tourism business can improve its sustainability credentials on your platform?
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy answer, but I would say that the most important thing is do something sustainable. So let's start from that. Let's start from getting accreditations, getting certification. Let's get to understand, especially for destinations, that sustainability is not a nice to have, but it should be at the core of their strategy and their promotional strategy, especially. And I mentioned at the beginning, transparency, accountability. This is very important. Again, trying to understand what can be done, how can be done, and being accountable, being responsible for what for what can be done and cannot be done. And I think the main issue in our industry is the what is called intention to action gap, or say do gap. People, I mentioned some stats at the beginning. People say that they want to travel more sustainably. People say that they're looking for sustainable alternatives, but their wallet is not always where their mouth is. So we as an industry need to make sure that we work on the high cost of sustainable travel. Olivier, you mentioned it. We need to make sure that sustainability is not a more expensive alternative. Sustainability should be the norm. And especially we need to work also on the perception that sustainability is more expensive. We need to work on the lack of information. And this is what we do at Tripadvisor. We try to allow people, travelers, to have access to those sustainability information. And this is why US destinations need to do something and need to be accountable. And we need to make sure, especially, that we work against the lack of credibility around certifications and these type of programs. People don't have a lot of faith, but we need to raise awareness on and trust, especially in sustainable accreditation and sustainable information.
Okay. Perfect, Fabrizio. So now we have had kind of a very interesting discussion so far. And now let's dive a bit more into the depths here. Okay. So Olivier, we have heard from Upali about how Sri Lanka is doing things, and we have heard from Fabrizio about how Tripadvisor is taking things up a notch. So the question to you is, how do you see the balance between the inherent negativity and anxiety in social conversations about climate change and the opportunities to harness positive sentiment drivers for encouraging travel?
So I mean, addressing the challenges that are posed by climate change while trying to simultaneously attract visitors is usually a very complex task that requires innovation and clear communication. There are a few interesting examples, I think, in Asia Pacific in particular, which are showing, how to balance that in a proper way. I'm thinking particularly about very concrete things like the Palau Pledge, the very small island in the Pacific. They have a very unique approach. So when you land and when you arrive, they make you sign a kind of a pledge upon arrival that you commit to act in a very sustainable way. That's really part of a broader strategy to combat the effect of climate change. And what I like in this is, what could be considered as a constraint and something like pretty constraintful for visitors is becoming a very positive element of positivity in terms of, sentiment, in terms of reputation. It's a bit the same for the Taiki promise in New Zealand, which is also asking visitors to be able to act responsibly. We could think about Bhutan is another interesting example because it's probably a bit extreme, but Bhutan, I think, is the only carbon negative country in the world, and they are trying to maintain, through forest cover protection or using hydroelectric power, promoting a lot of sustainability. They're also putting a bit of a cap of numbers of visitors, so they kind of use this a way to balance between protecting and keeping attracting. And the last example, maybe for Japan, is interesting because it's all about safety. And they have developed some robust disaster preparedness plans, and they are mentioning that to visitors. So it's a way to not hide the reality of risk, but saying, okay, there could be a risk, but we have a plan to help you and reduce the potential risk if you come. So there are lots of examples to kind of balance between facing the reality that could be a bit negative and offering great opportunities to generate positive sentiments.
Yeah. Thanks, Olivier. So, Upali, the question to you is, we just heard Olivier talk about travel sentiment, and the reputation. So how does Sri Lanka plan to address the increasing concern among the travelers about climate change and sustainability?
Interesting question. Climate change is a challenge for everyone, and the sustainability is the answer to our question. So in that, referring in tourism, how much we take our tourism sector, tourism activities, as well as the impact of tourism or minimization or development resilience with the sustainability initiative. Of course, we all know with the detailed presentation, how does it affect on the reputation of the destination. So taking that as a challenge. So we look at the sustainability has given us an opportunity. One thing is a growing market to capture as an opportunity for us to share the tourism benefit. On the other hand, very important in tourism, any country, it is the sensitive resource base, the sensitive tourism, the attractions, whether it's a natural or cultural we are using, protect them and think about the future generation, and also think about its global impact like climate change, got an opportunity. So which is a sustainable tourism answer. To be tourism to be sustainable, we need to have a sustainable management and sustainable practices. If we remember the sustainable management and sustainable practices for the sustainability of the tourism industry, any country, any region, so that will be a strong message for us to work for sustainability and adopt the sustainable practices with tourism activities or the businesses.
Perfect. Thanks, Upali, for the wonderful response. Fabrizio, in continuation to Pali's response, in your collaboration with national hospitality and tourism bodies, what trends have you observed in how destinations are adapting their marketing strategies in response to climate change?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. I think there's two major trends that we're observing. One is around, we as a global economy, we are transitioning from an economy of goods to an economy of experiences, and so is the travel industry. We're moving from the classic weekend in a city center or the sun-soaked holidays to these new type of holidays where people want to explore the destination, want to immerse themselves into the destination, want to connect with locals. And I think it's coming from the pandemic, go off the beaten path, trying to avoid a lot of people. And it sort of generated this trend where people feel like it's very important to do these outdoor experiences to connect with local communities, to support also financially local communities. So we saw in Tripadvisor an uptick in research in all major markets on eco-tours, sustainable accommodations, sustainable experiences. So this is definitely a trend. Destinations are doing their best to promote the idea of come here and immerse yourselves into the local destinations, immerse yourself, speak with locals, travel with locals, do activities with locals. And the other one is sustainability. Of course, a lot of destinations are putting, Olivier was mentioning the Tiaki Promise, the Palau Pledge. A lot of destinations are working on putting sustainability at the core of their strategy, which of course mirrors in the way in which they promote themselves. We're working with destinations also in this area. We increased a lot the type of relationships that we have with destinations focus on sustainability. Only last year, I mean, this year is very early, but last year we worked with Utah and Colorado in the US. They were focusing their campaigns on respecting the nature, leave no trace, care about nature, care about the environment. In Europe, we work with the PACA region, Olivier, you're French, so the Côte d'Azur Alpes region, and we created a campaign that is called A Change of Plan. So we're pushing people that were usually traveling into these regions by car to drop the car, take the train, take the bikes, travel with locals, experience with local guides, and making sure that they experience in a different way the destinations. I think, a lot of destinations are putting the environment and its protection at the core of what they're doing. And again, this is a new narrative that is a win-win because it allows them to protect themselves, to make sure that destinations can thrive and can be explored by future generations as well. And at the same time, it allows them to protect their natural resources.
Perfect. That's a wonderful way. So Olivier, in continuation to this, because now we see the connection between climate change and reputation of tourists. So what is one actionable insight from your research that destinations can implement immediately to mitigate negative perceptions related to climate change?
For sure, if not already done, but I think many of them already are done their homework in terms of gauging the the level of practice they have first of all through the SMEs and how they can fund and support the SMEs to go into that direction. So gauging through data, gauging through an assessment of the ecosystem that is in place in the destination. Also gauging the visitors' sentiment, gauging the residents and community sentiment. That's the key thing to start with for implementing and making sure that the actions you're going to take are prioritized, because you are not going to be able to fight all the battles at the same time. So so basically, for sure, gauging sentiment from the visitor point of view, but from also the local community's point of view is kind of a key in terms of practical research to do, I would say.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Olivier. Now, Upali, based on what Olivier just mentioned, I would like to know from you, like, what is one piece of advice you would give to other destinations looking to improve their sustainability practices?
when it comes to sustainable practices, there are many. For all the sustainable practices to get into place, going ahead with sustainable certification criteria knowledge, as well as going ahead with the national interest to protect the resource base, as well as keep the benefit on a sustainable manner for the people of the country. So we all need to look at how best we can adopt the sustainable practices where resource base is protected, the benefit is sustained. With that, tourist interest, a growing tourist interest can be a opportunity to the country. So in that message, the sustainability is not a challenge, but it is an opportunity. So we take the sustainability as an opportunity for tourism, and its continuity is our message we can share with everyone, those who are in tourism.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Upali. That's indeed a very wonderful advice. Fabrizio, we know that TripAdvisor has a lot of reviews and also a lot of initiatives when it comes to destination sustainability and even, changing the perceptions. So we want to know from the consumer side. So what role do travelers review play in shaping the sustainability narrative for destinations on TripAdvisor?
Yeah. I mean, as you said, the core component of our platform is reviews. And in general is UGC, user-generated content, and that's what we leverage to allow other travelers to have access to information. So I think, Olivier, you were mentioning in your presentation at the beginning, and you specifically mentioned TripAdvisor as well. So we are seeing a spike of mentions on sustainability or sustainable attractions, sustainable tours, eco tours, et cetera, on TripAdvisor, also within reviews. So we know that this is something that people are looking for, people do care about, and they also want to share the sustainability information that they collected, if you want, during their trips with the rest of the TripAdvisor community. Overall, we're talking about more than 80% of travelers around the world that look at reviews, not just on TripAdvisor, of course, especially on TripAdvisor, but also on other platforms before they travel. So reviews can be definitely leveraged from not just platforms, but also travelers to disseminate information and to collect information on sustainable travels. And I mentioned in the beginning, I think one of the main issues that we have as an industry is the intention to action gap. So reviews can also help those folks that say, yeah, I want to travel more sustainably, but I cannot do that because I don't have access, or it's very difficult for me to have access to sustainability information. They can have access to reviews on TripAdvisor as well, or on other platforms that focus on sustainability, so that, as Upali said, sustainability can be seen as an opportunity rather than something that needs to be done or that generate fears or concerns within destinations and accommodation and businesses in general.
Thanks, Fabrizio. We are going to start the wrapping up, but we still have 5 minutes left, and we have a couple of questions from our participants. So we have a question from Myomin about how about carbon neutral tourism? There is specific panelists listed, so any one of you would like to take this question? Carbon neutral tourism.
Well, it's certainly a big big question that it's just impossible to answer to this. Of course, I think the whole market is realizing that the question of climate change on travel is equally important as the question of travel on climate change, and so there's a big let's say some initiatives about how you can offer to compensate when you fly from again London to Bangkok as a destination, how do you compensate that with offsetting, by planting trees and so on? But I think everybody knows that it's not sufficient in any case. So having a purely carbon neutral tourism start probably first with visiting places which engage into carbon neutrality. There are a few places, and the one I have in mind are probably more in Europe, like Copenhagen or Stockholm. They're committed to be completely carbon neutral by 2030. And doing this, basically, they do promotion, they do communication that are not directed to tourism, but they actually do that in a very indirect way. And we see working for them for a long time that they are kind of extremely attractive also because they commit to that. But then the question is, of course, when you have to fly from Germany to Australia, you're going to burn a lot of fuel, and so you're not carbon neutral anymore. So how do you compensate that destination? It's again the mixed feeling about feeling a bit guilty, but still being guided in a way that you may have a chance to somehow compensate at least your carbon footprint. So at the end of the day, the equation is kind of a bit neutral, but we all know it's probably not enough.
Thanks, Olivier. Upali, would you like to add something to Olivier's response?
Certainly, most of the areas covered, but still when come to the climate change, we look at climate change as a challenge. How we present is a challenge. But as an eye-opener, when you look at climate change, given us more attention to find a solution. So within the solution, the SDG came into play, and achieving the SDG as a collective agreement, we have come to the Paris Agreement, where this climate change actions as well as readiness came into effect. That picture shows how we go to work, and ultimately we are with sustainability initiative today. This opportunity, once again, I'm emphasizing, we got to look at in a broader perspective. We got to look at as an opportunity. With that, the sustainability initiative go into detail, respecting the pillars, the conservation of the environment, also looking at the community benefit, simultaneously look at the economic benefit. Finally, we all collectively have the share of tourism with a fare to the community and the environment. So in that sense, a climate change adaptation is inbuilt, and the answer to the climate change through our initiative is there in this management method. If we understand this comprehensive concept in simple language, planet, people, profit. So we are there to achieve not only the climate change answer, but also succeed in tourism and many other practices through the sustainability actions.
Thanks, Upali, for that wonderful add-on. Fabrizio, would you like to add something to what Olivier and Upali said?
There's not a lot to add. The only thing I wanted to say is I'm an optimist by nature. So even if it's very, very difficult and it's a lofty goal, we're closer than ever to achieve it. We're working on sustainable aviation fuel. We're working as an industry collectively towards becoming more sustainable. So it's not something that is possible today, maybe, probably, very probably, but it's something we're all working on. So we need to look at things. I always say, we're not close, but we're closer than ever. And I think that we're going into the right direction. So hopefully this is something that will be the norm in a few years.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of Q&A, and I would like to thank all our panelists for taking their valuable time out today and going through all these questions, sharing wonderful insights, and I had a lot of fun learning new things and gaining insight, and I believe all our participants also enjoyed the discussion. And once again, thank you for your time. And now we will start with the wrap up. So you're free to carry on with the rest of your day, or if you want to stay for a couple more minutes, that's totally up to you. Thank you once again. And the research, Climate Change Impact on Destination Reputation, is the Issues and Trends Volume 29, Q1 2024, is now available on PATA website. So you can go to www.pata.org/catalog to access this report. And if you enjoyed this webinar, we hope that you can also join us in person for a physical event, the PATA Annual Summit 2024, that's taking place in Macau from May 15 to May 17 with the theme Reimagining Tourism. You can scan the QR code for further details and the registration processes. The next event that is taking place is in Thailand, PATA Travel Mart 2024, from August 27th to August 29th in Bangkok. So again, we look forward to meeting you in person and hope you would like to join us for these events. Again, the QR code is on the screen. You can scan the QR code to have more details about the registration and other themes. And last but not the least, we have another event of the year, which is the PATA Destination Marketing Forum 2024 with the theme of Authentic Prosperous Journeys, which includes nurturing culture, culinary delights, and community wisdom. This is taking place in Cha Am, Thailand, November 12 to 14. If you would like to register for more than one event, we also have bundle packages for event registration. You can reach out to PATA website, events team, or directly to me at PATA, www.pata.org, or email me at pubnesh@pata.org. And with that, I would like to thank everyone to participate. First of all, to our speakers for sharing their valuable time and insights. Thanks to all our members, partners, chapter members, executive board for their continued support to the association, without which none of this would be possible. Thank you once again to all our participants for joining the webinar. Stay safe and hope to see you soon.